Hello, everyone. I will take a few minutes to explain how to use the GoToWebinar technology. I am going to show you some of the features that allow us to make our presentation more interactive. You should see the control panel pictured on your screen right now. If you do not, it is because it has been minimized, and you can pull it back out by going to the Grab tab. This tab hides and shows the control panel. There is also an attendee list where you can see all of the participants on the call. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the control panel, and I can unmute your line. Another way to participate is through the question pane. You can type your question in the question pane, and I can read it to the group or respond privately. All panes can be expanded or minimized by clicking on the plus or minus button that are on the top left of each pane. In the past, we had some audio trouble. If for some reason you are having difficulty being heard, you will want to make sure that you are not muted on your personal phone and that you enter the audio pin provided to you at the beginning of the call. If that does not work, you can hang up and call back in and be sure to enter the audio pin.
Good day, everyone. Tran, if you can do me a favor and just share your screen. All right. Good day, everyone. Once again, I'm Dr. Samad West Keys, Associate Director of Policy and Programs here at Achieving the Dream. I'd like to welcome everyone to Achieving the Dream's January Leader College webinar. We also have Tran Lee, Program Coordinator, joining us, who you just heard, who is also part of ATD's staff as well. Just to give a quick announcement, as many of you may have noticed, this month's webinar is a little later in the month than it normally has been in previous months, and this was to allow our members in our network to return back to their institutions after the holiday break. We'll resume our regularly scheduled webinars in the month of March, taking a break in February for the 2016 Dream Institute that'll be held in Atlanta, Georgia between February 23rd and the 26th. This month's webinar will focus on the Minority Male Community College Collaborative, M2C3, and the work being done at Highline College and the Heritage Hero Young Men of Color group, and how they were able to use institutional leaders in advancing equity and student success for men of color on their campus. Today, men of color remain less likely to obtain an associate's degree than their white male counterparts. A relatively recent report by the Center for Community College Engagement reported that despite the fact that Black and Latino males have been shown to have an increased interest in obtaining an associate's degree and have been more engaged, white male counterparts than their white male counterparts, only 5% obtain the goal of earning an associate's degree in 3 years compared to 32% of white males. Today we have Dr. Frank Harris III and Dr. J. Luke Wood, associate professors and co-directors of the Minority Male Community College Collaborative, otherwise known as M2C3, at San Diego State University, and Mr. Rashad Norris, Director of Community Engagement and Outreach Services at Highline College, to discuss how we can address this issue and decrease the gap in achievement for men of color. With that being said, I'd like to pass the floor over to the panelists, and we can begin the webinar.
Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Luke Wood, and I am the co-director of the Minority Male Community College Collaborative at San Diego State University, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Frank Harris III.
Good morning, good afternoon to our colleagues on the East Coast, and thank you all for joining us.
So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the work we do at M2C3 and how this aligns with the work that Achieving the Dream is doing in really helping colleges better understand the experiences and outcomes of certain student groups and using that information to advance outcomes for students who have been historically underrepresented and underserved in education.
Great, thank you. This is, once again, this is Frank Harris, and I'm going to lead the presentation for M2C3. Next slide. Just to provide a little bit of background and context as to why the work that we do is important. here we're presenting data from a College Board report that was published maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And the key takeaway here is if we look at the 6 pathways that in the case of these data, Latino men can take after high school to enroll in post-secondary education, enlist in the military, employment, unemployment, incarceration, and death. You see that really when we compare the percentage of Latino men who are represented in some pathways as in comparison to their female counterparts, we see that they're overrepresented among those who enlist in the military, unemployment, incarceration. Obviously, these data tell us that there's something going on within the lived experiences of men of color that lead them to these deleterious pathways in some respects. And if we look at the next slide, we see the same data that's presented for African American men, and the patterns are remarkably similar to those of Latino men. Next slide. So again, when we think about why do we focus on men of color beyond the data that were just presented, we recognize that there's a need for educators to enact strategies to mediate the effects. And when we talk about, we're talking here specifically about men of color in community college, but we have to mediate the negative effects of poor K-12 schooling experiences. Students who we have the opportunity to interview and talk with at M2C3 regularly recall having experiences during their K-12 education that were less than ideal, relationships with educators that were not grounded in what they would consider to be mutual respect and authentic care or concern for learning and so forth. So we know that that's a challenge that we have to address as post-secondary educators. We also know that men of color experience a set of external life pressures, particularly with regard to racist stereotypes that sort of portray them in really negative ways, as uninterested in education, lacking in capacity to learn. We talk about the criminal, having the sort of criminal perspective on men of color. We see that with what's going on in places like Baltimore, when we think about Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and all these young men who are being slain in many respects by police. It's because that there's this idea that men of color are criminals and thugs and have to be treated more harshly than others. We also know that these same racial and gender stereotypes permeate educational institutions. We regularly hear from students that tell us that they don't have relationships with faculty in which faculty engage them in a way that suggests that they respect them and that they really believe in their ability to learn and be successful. And then this last point on the slide, this underexposure to effective preparation experiences. This is our way of saying that we know that by virtue of being educated in urban environments where their schools are typically under-resourced, men of color often haven't gotten the preparation experiences that they need to really thrive and be successful in community college. So this is why we focus our work on men of color, with really a focus on helping educators build the capacity to mediate the effects of some of these issues. Next slide. So a little bit more about M2C3. We're a research and practice center that's housed at San Diego State University. And really our core mission is to partner and collaborate with community colleges to build the institutional capacity that's necessary to serve men of color equitably and responsibly. We have campus-based partnerships that focus on institutional assessment, professional development. We're also engaged in making sure that we publish our work and put it in the scholarly domain as well to support the research efforts that are needed to address the problems and concerns that were noted in the previous slide. And the last point that's on this slide, the RISE Advisory Board. RISE stands for Research, Intervention, Strategies, and Evaluation. And this is an entity that was supported by a group of philanthropic leaders who made a commitment to realize the intended goals and outcomes of President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative. So M2C3 represents the community college and workforce component of that initiative. Next slide. So when we think about the ways in which we try to contribute to both the scholarly and practice domains around men of color in community colleges, institutional assessment and capacity building is a key part of what we do. We also engage in inquiry and conduct ongoing research, both qualitative and quantitative research. And then we try to be very, very intentional, but also very purposeful in disseminating our knowledge broadly through conferences, through books, articles, webinars. We have a webinar series that we do each month. So we try to really be broad in doing so. Next slide. Also think it's important to note that we engage and develop a set of instruments to facilitate assessment and capacity building. You see 4 that are presented here. We also have the one that's not depicted in this slide is our Community College Survey of Men, which is an institutional level needs assessment tool that we administer at the colleges where we partner. We gather the insights from that survey and we use that to inform our professional development activities that we do with faculty and staff at the colleges. The CCIP, the Community College Insights Protocol, is really a focus group protocol that we developed to collect data from students, qualitative data. The Community College Student Success Inventory, the CCSSI, is really an institutional self-assessment tool. So this is a tool that we share with colleges when they're at the early stages of conversations about what are some of the things we need to be doing to assess our readiness as an institution to support men of color and build the capacity to serve them. So the CCSSI has a set of indicators in 6 different areas: advising, early alert systems, financial aid, minority male initiatives, and 2 others, in which there are a set of indicators that says colleges who have the readiness to facilitate success for men of color, these are the elements within each domain that are necessary. The MPACE is the Male Program Assessments for College Excellence tool, and this is a tool that we developed to support minority male initiatives and similar programs to assess the outcomes that they're intending to deliver and provide students based on those programs. And then the Community College Instructional Development Inventory is a tool that we'll use to collect data from faculty to gain their insights and to determine what are some of the ways and some of the professional development needs and other perspectives that they have about what's necessary and needed to build their capacity to serve men of color. Next slide. And that's the Community College Survey of Men. Next. At MCC3, we also host a national consortium on college men of color. And really it's designed to bring together a range of institutional partners, mostly community colleges, but there's some 4-year institutions who participate as well. And we're really fortunate to be supported by 7 educational policy and practice organizations, Achieving the Dream being one of them, in being able to deliver this consortium. So really it has several components. It has our monthly webinar series that we host where we provide insights and information on a range of issues and concerns. So things like how do you gain institutional buy-in to support efforts to support success for men of color? What are some best practices with regard to implementing mentoring programs and initiatives? And there's a lot of topics that we try to cover in our monthly webinar series. As a part of that series, we also do information sharing sessions, which are very similar to the one that we're participating here today, where we bring in partners from our colleges to talk about the things and their efforts and things that they have found effective and important in supporting men of color. And then we do an annual working group meeting here in San Diego where we invite members of the consortium to come together where we can really sort of roll up our sleeves and engage in having some more intentional conversations about how do we engage in inquiry, strategic planning, and do it in a way that's sustainable and that will allow these efforts to persist for more than a year or 2 as they often do on campuses. Next. And this is just a list of some of our consortium partners. I want to highlight that you see we have partners from across the country. California, obviously, we're going to have a lot of representation there because of where we're situated here in San Diego, but we have partners throughout the country who are working with us in the consortium. Next. In terms of the rationale, I think there's some important things to note here. Why did we decide to launch the consortium? We know that a lot of the conversations around supporting boys and men of color in education are often influenced by a four-year paradigm. So we've seen across the country where community colleges, a lot of what's been available to them just based on the published research has been what's taking place at four-year institutions, and there wasn't an intentional focus on looking at what works at community colleges. So we sought to fill that gap. We also know that the political climates in advancing equity initiatives that focus on populations like men of color can be intense, so we felt like the consortium was a way to support our colleagues in being able to sustain their energies and come up with ideas to overcome some of these political barriers. We wanted to challenge this deficit perspective as well, assuming that men of color weren't capable or was a population that needed to be saved as opposed to being empowered and supported, which is something that we advocate, and then wanted to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure that the outcomes that are being espoused in programs are actually measurable and are actually being achieved. And then there's some other ways in which opportunities to bring data and decision making into the conversation to provide a space for information sharing and a number of different key things that we have found to be important for the consortium. Next slide. This is just a picture from our working group meeting from 2015. You see that we have colleagues here who are really having intentional conversations, who are engaged in activities. So it's not just the type of, we really are very intentional about calling it a working group meeting and not a conference, because we don't want folks to be just passive, sort of just be passively engaged in just acquiring information and not actually having the opportunity to share, discuss, apply, and so forth. And Dr. Sean Harper from the University of Pennsylvania was our keynote speaker for the this past year's working group meeting. Next slide. This is just some of the topics that we cover, pardon me, in our webinar series. And you can see here that we're intentional about making sure that we have them once a month and that we're addressing key topics and issues that are important and instructive for our colleagues who are working at community colleges to facilitate student success for men of color. And then, to sort of conclude with these last two slides, we thought it would be important to highlight some of the things that we've learned from our work with regard to, we often think about high impact practices for students. We like to think about high impact institutional level practices, so things that institutions can do to support and really to transform the ways in which institutions and educators who staff them work with and support men of color. So thinking about professional development is something for all faculty and staff, including part-timers. It's a practice that we often advocate. Making sure that when we make faculty decisions about faculty hiring and faculty promotion, that we're bringing in folks who have a proven track record of success in working with historically underserved populations. Making sure that there are full-time faculty in key gatekeeper courses. We know oftentimes that when we look at courses where students seem to have the most challenges, those are gatekeeper courses, and those courses are often taught by part-time and adjunct faculty. Not that part-time and adjunct faculty aren't important partners in this, but we know that students may need to have more regular access to their faculty in these courses just because of, excuse me, the rigor and some of the challenges that they often have in these courses. So having faculty who are on campus who are available to students would be important. Early alert systems are something that we regularly advocate, making sure that when students are having difficulty, that we identify those difficulties early and that we make sure we reach out and support students and provide the resources and support that they'll need to be successful. We talk about being very intrusive with students, both in resources, practices, and ways in which we serve them, not sitting back and waiting for students to come to us when they have concerns or challenges. And this is a real key point when we talk about men of color, because when we think about gender socialization in the United States, one of the key lessons that we learn is that men are often socialized to not seek help. And there's a real reluctance to do so because of fear of being perceived as weak or incapable, or in the case of men of color, to reinforce a lot of the stereotypes about them as learners that we described earlier. So we think that institutions have a responsibility to be intrusive and to be proactive in reaching out and offering support to students. Next slide. And I think from there we are ready to transition to Rashad, who's going to talk about some of the efforts that are taking place at Highline College. Also want to highlight that Highline is a member of our national consortium as well as a Dream College, so we're really happy to have the opportunity to co-present this webinar with Rashad on behalf of Highline. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to just say a big thank you to Achieving the Dream and to the M2C3 consortium for inviting me. I'm excited to share what we're doing here at Highline College. So let me just go ahead and dive in. So I started here in 2007 as the recruiter here at Highline. And just to give you an overview of the area, the communities that I serve, we serve over 70% of students here on Highline campus are young people of color. So my community has already been recognized as one of the highest students of color populated area in the state of Washington. Especially nationally, we've been recognized as well up in Tukwila area where we have a lot of Somalian families and refugees and immigrants here as well. So with that being said, our school system we serve, I believe that we're at least 88% of our teachers are white. So our school system just does not reflect our populated areas in our local community. So as a community college, I knew it was going to be tough for us to do the proper recruiting that was assigned to me as a recruiter for Highline College. So when I got here, I used to go out to the schools and sit at the tables and try to recruit kids, and it just was not the thing that I saw as true relationship building to get these kids aware of college. So I came to my school, came to my college, and I said, hey, we got to do something different. And I said, we got to change the approach. We got to change the way we're talking to these students of color because this is our population. And so I asked that my title, they changed my title to Community Engagement Director, and I wrote a proposal in regards to outreach versus recruitment and the investment piece. So if you turn the page to the next one, the first thing I did was I talked to our local Federal Way School District, which is our local high school K-12 system. And we did a lot of data research on the attainment of students of color going to college, going on to 4-year or even 2-year colleges. And it was pretty low. And at that time in 2007, 2008, I want to believe that we were at a 13% African-American student population and a 12 to 15% Latino Hispanic population. So we were sitting pretty low in comparison to our white counterparts and students here on campus. So we at Federal Way School District and we came up with this program called the Heritage Leadership Camp. Now this was an investment piece because this was a different outreach. We were no longer going to the high schools, we were going to the middle schools. And we were trying to connect with these young men at an earlier age because by the time they were getting to high school, it was a pretty difficult switch to get them to understand the importance of them going into higher ed. So we said, you know what, let's start a little bit early, let's get them at the middle school. So we created this program called the Heritage Leadership Camp. And when we created this program, the most important thing was that I had to get my president and my VP and exec staff and even my boss on board with this idea because this was going to change the approach of us going out there and just talking strictly to high school students that we felt were going to be prepared to come in here ASAP, especially our students of color. So when we created this program, my president, everybody was on board. It worked out. It was a 3-year commitment. So if you go to the next page, it was a 3-year commitment. Our whole goal was to close the achievement gap within our state of Washington. It was also to close the enrollment gap of our young students of color into Highline College versus our white students and Asian students, which was pretty high. It was supported by the superintendent and from the program coordinator. Her name is Treese Moore. So that had to be aligned first. If you go to the next page, our purpose, we served over 75 young men of color with an educational leadership experience, and what we did was we brought them to the campus 3 times out of the year. So each quarter they came to the campus for a full day. And what we did was we actually had community leaders, young, older men of color that were treated, who were mentors for these young men. So these men that came in as mentors, they were community members that were business owners, or they were in the education system themselves. Anywhere possible, they were just in the community with where these kids could recognize them. And they actually took time, and this is all volunteer, they took time to come here out of those days that we had the Heritage Leadership Camp here on campus, to come and spend a day with these students. Now on campus, we didn't do the typical let's go to school. This was much more than just let's go to school. Why is it important for you, a young man of color, to recognize your greatness? So there were different keynote, we had different speakers, we did breakout sessions with their leaders, with their mentors. So each mentor had about, I say 10 to 12 kids within the group. I served as a mentor. And what we did was we did leadership activities within the classroom. We fed them lunch, and then they went back to the school. And when they went back to the school, the thing that we had to do as mentors was we had to be consistent with us meeting with these students. So every 2 weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks, the mentor went in to see those students that he mentored at the Heritage Leadership Camp. So these kids continuously saw these men, not just here on campus, but in the community or in their school. So that was a plus for the program. So if you go to the next page, so it's about 15 to 20 students per mentor, it's 3-day visits. And it was to increase basically the success in their school and in life. So these young men saw these mentors, and it was I would say this: in order to make this happen, it had to be intentional. It just had to be intentional with understanding what was going on with our young men within our community. Now, when these young boys came here and they experienced the college in itself, they felt welcome. They felt welcome. They went back to school. We have great data that was received from the schools, qualitative and somewhat quantitative. Or out of the 70 young men that attended, I would say 50 or more, their grades went up. It was like a 1 grade increase. So a lot of these kids were right on the borderline. They were like C pluses, and how they chose these kids, they weren't the fire kids who were, the F and the D's. These kids were right at that level, like that C minus, that close to that D. So they were right on the verge. So when they did their grade, there was a grade that went up. So if it was a C, it went up to a B. If it was a B, it went up to an A. It was 1 grade increase with these kids who attended the Heritage Leadership Camp. Not only that, we looked at their behavior, their behavior referrals as well. And some of these kids would get kicked out of class for just talking, or it was more so just being loud. That behavior, that went down as well. And these kids start to be more responsive in school, and they start to be more present in school. We had parents that attended at times that were in tears because their young men have changed. I still have a young man that I mentor. He's now gone on to get his master's degree. This is back when he was in 8th grade. He attended here. He played soccer, at University of Washington. He's now getting his master's degree. He still comes back. So when we have other groups, they come back and speak in regards to what it means to be a young man who's gone through a program like this and now moved on to get their higher ed education. So this is the model of trying to use these young men or using young men as outreach or recruiters for the college and for the community. So if you go on to the next page, the first camp session, this is getting to know your mentor. What does it mean to be a student? What does it mean to build relationships? We did a team activity. It was beautiful just to see how these young men opened up after the first session. Because the first session, obviously, we gotta know who are you, what you talking to me for, and so that was the first initial camp, was just to getting to know who we were and what we were doing here on campus with these young men. And if you go to the next page, the second camp session was the goal setting. Um, the personal and social choices that they make within school and out of school. We had one of the activities that we had was around the finance piece, around them wanting to have so much in life and what it means for them to make better choices, to have those things, and what it means to have choice. And so once again, this was not trying to get them to come to Highline College. This is to get them to understand the meaning of a choice and have an education. So I just want to always put that out there with the support that I have with the school around outreach as a community college and then a recruiter to come to the college. And this is outreach. So if you look at our ATD expected outcomes on the next page, it was the institutional change that we can use here at the college when we see the increase. So just to give you a number, since 2007, 2008, and I have the numbers here, since 2007, 2008, we had 13 and 12% African American Latino students here on campus. Now, up to now, we have 20% African American here on campus and 23% Latino Hispanic students here on campus. And our Pacific Islander numbers went up as well to 24% from 14%. So I would attribute that, and plus the president, the exec staff, my VP did attribute that the outreach that we're doing here on campus is so much more intentional, and the programs that we have here do not just speak to just come to college. It's more of a holistic approach around who are you and why is it important for you to recognize your greatness in knowing that you are a young man of color and you have some barriers, yes, but you can overcome these barriers. So if you look at the next page, the collected qualitative data that we had, so these are the ones that I just highlighted, was the attitude adjustment, just knowing how they gain knowledge around planning for their future. And then we also taught them how, one of the things that I always present to these students about responding versus reacting. And we taught them how to respond rather than react, because it's easy for them to be displaced from the classroom when they react. But when they respond with questions around, the reasons for them being displaced from the classroom and having these teachers talk to them, it allows them to feel more empowered around their voice. So here's another one. So what happened with that program? The Heritage Leadership Camp, there was a new superintendent that came in to Federal Way School District. And once this new superintendent came in, the program went away. And because they cut the funding for the Heritage Leadership Camp, there were many teachers and many administrators in these schools that felt that that program was singling out just students of color, which we had to fight and let them know, yes, you are correct. And I brought them data. We highlighted data within the school district to show them the reasons why we were doing it, and they still didn't buy into it. So the new superintendent that was here last year, they cut the funding for that program. Now, this year we just got another superintendent. So I have a meeting with her this coming March, and I'm trying to bring that program back. But what had happened was I started my own program in the same type of way that we ran that Heritage Leadership Program, and that was called HERO. and HERO stands for Honor Education and Respect Others. This program came directly from me as the outreach coordinator or the community engagement director here on campus, and my college has allowed me to do this as well. So if you go to the next page, what I've done is I go into middle schools and I speak with young men of color with groups, and I have at least like maybe 10 to 15, sometimes even 20 to 25 young men that I go and speak with on a every 2-week basis. So we spend an hour with them, and I go through presentations with them. We do team activities with them. And also what I've done is I teamed up with University of Washington, where we actually take them, we start them here on a day for an hour and a half here at Highline, and we go through the whole process of going to a community college, and then we add in the piece of if you go here, you can transfer to a 4-year school. So then we transfer these kids from a bus because I partner with UW. We then take them to the University of Washington, and we end the visit with them going to the University of Washington as a student started at a 2-year school transferring up to UW, and they go through the process there as well. And they get the opportunity to walk on the campus, they get the opportunity to walk on the field. So they are getting a full process of what it means to go to a 2-year versus, from a 2-year and transferring to a 4-year. So these small groups that I have, these pictures that you see, these young men, I'm teaching them how to wear a tie. So we do tie day. We get them shirts, so they all get to wear shirts. They're identified throughout the school. There's a banner within the school that is displayed. They come to the campus. I bring them to the campus at the end of the visits that I have there at the school. So the end goal is if they abide by the rules that we've put together, that I put together with them in regards to making sure that they're present in class, that they're trying to always increase a grade to a better increase it to a better grade. We also have them with behavior with discipline as well. So if they abide by all these rules, at the end of the year, I bring them up here for a campus visit, along with all the other schools that I have with small young men of color too groups. And right now I have over 6 middle schools that I do this with within my local community. So, and then when they get to high school, I try to continue that process of going to see them, of being consistent to go see them while they're in high school as well. And so when they're in high school, what I've done, if you go to the next page, this is an activity that we do within the groups. It's called Cost to Be a Man. And so obviously I just put together a little activity, and they just get $200, and there's characteristics of what it means that society has placed on them, what it means to be a man, and they have $200, and they have to spend the money wisely and put together what it looks like to be a man. And so why is this good? Because it gives them opportunity just to really talk to one another, because they're in groups and they discuss what does it look like, what does it feel like, and it just brings a rich discussion with them not even knowing some of these terms and not even knowing that what these terms mean. It inhibits them from being a real man because they don't know what it means. So that alone sets up the discussion around how do we even think we can get these kids into college if they don't even know what it means to be successful as the individuals that they are. So that first has to be discovered before we talk about let's go to college. So if you go to the next slide, when they go to high school, I know it's harder for me to go in and talk to them in regards to those small groups. So what we've done here is I had a chance to go down to the Black and Brown College Brown conference in Tampa, Florida, many years back. I want to say 7 years back now. And so when I went down there, I saw how the setup was it was geared towards those college students. So I went down there and I saw the platform and I said, you know what, I'm gonna start something up here. So I started a Highline College Black and Brown Male Summit for high school students, and it was for 9th grade through 12th grade. Now, when I first started the first year, we were at ATD, we were partners then, and I wrote up a big program for this, I wrote up a proposal for this program. And so ATD and my VP and my president, they all agreed to it, and they provided me some funds. These funds were enough for me to get buses for all the kids in my local school district. I could get a bus, this bus, and it was on a Saturday. It was from 8 to 4. Now, when I went into the high schools and talked to these boys, because 80% of these schools have white women or white teachers, they were unable to um, really just advertise and get this information out to these young men of color because there was no relationships within these schools. So what happened was my first year, having these buses there, I depended on me just sending out a flyer to the schools, thinking that it would be enough. Well, my first year, I only had 20 to 25 kids show up on a Saturday, 8 to 4. We had food laid out, we had shirts, everything. It was my first year. I was hoping for the best because I had already been out there in these schools, and I thought there was relationships within the teachers and administrators, and I thought wrong. So what happened was my second year, I said, you know what, I'm going to go out to every school, and I'm going to have these little small groups of these young men, and I'm going to promote it myself, and we're going to talk about some real issues about what was going to be at this summit because there was no relationships with these kids. So we're on my 6th year now. If you go down, and I'm speeding through, I'm sorry, I know my time's coming up. If you look, we are the first Black and Brown Summit in the state of Washington. This was an amazing feat for the state of Washington, not just state of Washington, but Highline College. We've now just concluded our 6th annual Black and Brown Male Summit this past November, and we had over 600 young men of color on this campus. And I had over 25 men of color from the community that ran different workshops. It was so large that we had to get these young men. We had workshops. We had a keynote speaker. They received all type of swag. If you're looking at picture, they all got beanies. These young men right now, they see Highline College as a place where there's relations there. So when we do outreach and recruitment, we look at the relationship first. I look at the relationship first. I no longer have to go into these schools and sit at a table and wait for these students to come over and hopefully talk to me about college or Highline College. The relationship is built now that they know who we are, and they know that we care for them because we are using a holistic approach. And what happens is our schools these days, we are recruiters. And that's where we're missing the point, where there has to be a stronger relationship around giving them history around what it means to be a young Black and brown male. And at these conferences, we go over topics that they are not used to hearing, not even close to hearing. And it has nothing to do with come to Highline. It has everything to do with why is it important for you to get an education. Now, you're going to make the choice of where you feel good at. And I'm betting on the choice is going to be Highline College. And through the numbers, it shows that our numbers have gone up drastically because of the outreach that we've been doing here at the college campus. And I know we're talking about young males, but I have a female version as well, and it's called Yale, and it stands for Young Educated Ladies Leading. And the second year, we have our 3rd year coming up in April. My first year, we had over 250 young women. Last year, we had 350. This year, we're betting on about 500 young women of color coming to this campus. So if anything, I would tell you this. As a director of community engagement, I'm very intentional about talking to our young people of color. And what I mean by that is I'm giving them a different conversation around what it means to have a true education. So I would just say, I know that's my time. I thank you all for that. It was real quick. Hopefully you can have my email address attached to this. If you want any questions, any more data or examples, I'm open for comments, concerns, questions, what have you. So thank you.
I'd like to say thank you again to Dr. Harrison Wood, and as well as as Rashad Norris from Highline College. I'd like to open up now for questions and discussions. Please feel free to insert your questions into the question box on the end. I'll read them out to our panelists, and we can move forward that way. Okay, our first question is for Drs. Harris and Wood. What are some suggestions that you would give to a college that's just starting to explore the topic of minority males and trying to increase their capacity to address this issue?
Certainly happy to take that question. I think one of the first important steps is to engage in inquiry. So gather data from your colleagues in institutional research, have a conversation with them about where the equity gaps are. I think oftentimes we know that men of color are struggling in one way or another, but we never really sort of get down to the details about where the struggles are, where the challenges are. Are we talking about specific programs? Are we talking about transitions? So to just be very intentional about using inquiry to inform your knowledge and understanding of where the gaps are. And then I think from there, another key step is to use that insight to gain institutional buy-in. So talk with the leadership of the college, make sure that they're informed about where the challenges are, use data to inform that conversation as well. And then I would start to think about who are some key partners on campus that should be invited into the conversation, and thinking about what would be some important next steps. So are we talking about forming a task force or some sort of committee or whatever it may be to think about how do we use the inquiry to inform what we're doing? And the reason why I think those steps are important is because I think sometimes it's tempting to look at, say, like a lot of the exciting things that are going on at Highline that Rashad described. I think, okay, we need to take what they're doing at Highline and immediately implement that at our college. And I think it's important not to start with that, because we know that equity gaps are often fueled or persist because of local conditions. There are things that are situated in every college that influences a student's experience. So I think it's important before you implement any type of programming or decide anything about what interventions you want to do, that every effort is informed by inquiry. And I think that you've done the homework, so to speak, in making sure that the right folks are on board, and that it's a broad institutional conversation, and that it's not just a conversation that's taking place in silos, because oftentimes we sort of say, okay, this is an issue that's going on, let's charge this office, this department, this person to focus on it and not allow it to be a part of a larger institutional effort. And I think when we're talking about equity gaps and the issues for men of color, we have to view it as an institutional challenge, not just something that can be that can be sort of handled in kind of a silent manner. So I know that was a long response to a very simple question, but I hope I added to it.
Thank you. This question is for Rashad. Rashad, have you been able to quantify a cost per student in your outreach effort?
I have not. I would say this, though, that when the larger events, they cost because of food, if anything. The food is where, you hit the students the best at when you say, you want to come to an event, we have some food. And at the summits, we have breakfast and lunch. And I would tell you that on our campus alone, our food is ridiculous. It would cost over $10,000 to serve that many students that we served this past summit, which is about 600. So it would cost us about $10,000. I know that I've done it before where I quantified the per student, and I forgot what the number, but it was, I want to say around 30, 35, which is, pretty high.
Okay.
And I think that the buy-in, and I love the gentleman said before, it's the buy-in piece, it's the investment piece, and the partnerships that I built on campus alone shows the investment piece and the understanding that this population of students needs to be, they need to be coddled a little bit more, just a little bit, they need a little bit more touch. So with that being said, you know, I partner with a lot of our departments here on campus, and I also set up a 501(c)(3) with my foundation, which people can go and donate money as well. So it goes towards outreach for our department. So the money piece hasn't been as scarce as others have mentioned to me about when they want to start programs, because I used different avenues to raise money and where people can put that money where they want to. And if they want to put an outreach, then I set aside an account for that.
Okay. Another related question is there a scholarship or some more other financial incentive funding available for recruited students?
Yes, we do have scholarships here, and this year, well, the following year, now that we have a nice pipeline starting up with donors and with sponsors who want to be more a part of the summit, we are going to set up a scholarship for next year. Okay. For our Black and Brown Young Men and for our Yale Female Summit.
Okay. This question is for M2C3. Do you have a date for your next convening, M2C3 convening?
Yeah, certainly. It's going to be June 9th and 10th. It'll be 2 full days here in San Diego. And we'll have some information about what details available on our website.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? I know we're running close to the end of the webinar. I'll await other questions. However, before I end, I wanted to also just do 2 quick announcements. One is I want to let everyone know that this and previous webinars are recorded and can be viewed at the HED YouTube channel. We'll also send out a link within the HED newsletter directing you to this webinar. And also, if you haven't done so already, please register for the 2016 Dream Institute. That'll be held in Atlanta, Georgia, from February 23rd to the 26th. And those are 2 announcements I have. Once again, I'd like to thank our partners at M2C3, as well as Rashad Norris from Highline College for coming in, facilitating a discussion around this topic, which is very important. So once again, I'd like to thank you and thank everyone for attending. With that being said, I'd like to tell everyone to have a great day, and please contact us if you have any questions about this webinar.
I'd like to say on behalf of M2C3, thank you for the opportunity.
I'd say thank you as well.